Okay, so you get your PhD, and you actually join the Hayden Planetarium, which you eventually become the director of a few years later.
I did a
and this is kind of where you started, and now you came back as the head of the same planetarium.
Yes. Yeah, as a kid, I was there. And so that imbues within me a certain sense of obligation. No, that sounds burdensome. Duty, a sense of duty that whatever I create there with our mixture of scientists and educators, that they will have the power of influence of a next generation of students the way the scientists and educators did on me. That's the least I could do for a city in which I grew up.
Well, in 2001, former President George W. Bush appointed you to serve on the Commission on the Future of the United States Aerospace Industry. So did you actually meet Bush and everything else during that time?
So, no, it depends what you mean by meet. We were in the same room together, but I didn't officially shake his hands and get a photo with him. But it was a White House commission, and there were 12 of us to study. The aerospace industry had been on hard times. There was a lot of consolidation in the industry. Innovation wasn't. You need diversity of corporate landscape to have some hope of innovation. Otherwise, the big corporations settle on what has always worked. And so there was a congressional concern, bipartisan congressional concern, that this would affect our commerce, our security, and our transportation. Because the aerospace industry makes our airplanes, they make our jets, and they make the cargo planes. So we went around the world studying this problem and then reported back to the White House. Yeah.
Right. And a few years later, 2004, you served on the President's Commission on Implementation of United States Space Exploration Policy, a.k.a. Moon, Mars, and Beyond.
Moon, Mars. Yeah, we had to tighten up that title. Right. It's yeah. So I was twice appointed by President Bush. That's correct.
Okay. And in Moon, Mars, and Beyond, what did you conclude in this whole program?
Yes.
If you were to sum it up in a way.
Yeah. So yeah, I can easily sum it up. The question is, why continue this? Why spend money up there if we have problems down here on Earth? This is a perennial concern, and it's a genuine concern when people express it. I don't ever want to make light of it, because your problems that you confront on Earth are very real to you, and whatever benefits going to space might bring are distant and abstract. So we mapped a route that within budget would enable NASA to continue its path of exploration, maintain the shuttle for some number of years, but then as you phase out the shuttle, you phase in a rocket that would then get you to Mars. But doing this on a time frame that is within the budget that NASA had continued to be receiving at that time. And that way we wouldn't be stalled going into space. And a backdrop of that was the rest of the world increasing their interest in space, including China launching their first astronaut. Of course, they'd be called a taikonaut. And China says, I put this in one of my books, speculation, but I'm all in on it, which is we don't invite China to participate in the International Space Station.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yes, they were disinvited.
Huh.
We invited Russia.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Russia, because they're brilliant people in Russia who were working on space. We don't want them to go to our enemies, whoever they were identified geopolitically at the time. Bring them with us, then they are our allies. And that's why the space station is primarily the United States and Russia and European other nations as well. But the big players were United States and Russia, because we had the spacecraft that'll get astronauts to the space station. Okay, it was a space shuttle and the Soyuz. Okay, so there's no China. What were the reasons? Oh, human rights violations. It was a political statement of our disapproval of their ways.
Russia didn't have human rights.
I know. I'm saying. I'm just saying. I'm not. You can't invoke rational thought on a geopolitical landscape.
Right.
You can only invoke geopolitics. Okay. So, I think I have no evidence for this. No evidence. I think deep down, someone somewhere said, if we disinvite China, we know they're going to do this on their own. They're going to make their own space station. They're going to put their own people in orbit. They have the resources. Their economy was on a tear. They're going to do it. And that'll spook us into redoubling our space efforts, because now we have a new adversary to replace the Soviet Union, which is the role they played when we went to the moon. So fast forward a few 15 years, and what do we have now? China says they want to put astronauts on the moon. Oh, we have the Artemis program. Returning to the moon.
Right.
And you part the curtains. Well, why? Oh, it's the right thing to do. Oh, yeah, it's exploration. We're going to do that. We could have stayed on the moon in 1972. Did we? No. We could have gone back by 1980. No. 1990. No. 2000. No. Yeah. 2010. No.
Right.
Oh, right now. We're going back now. So I think that whatever that thinking was back then is working, because people feel threatened by a frenemy around the world.
For everyone that says that the 1970s moon landing was fake, that it was done in a Hollywood studio somewhere, what do you say to them?
Well, I have several replies. One of them is, isn't it amazing that our technological and scientific achievements are so great that members of the civilization that created it are in denial of it? What a compliment to how far that technology has come.
Nice.
What a compliment. Thank you for the compliment.
Thank you for the compliment.
That it's mystery and magic to you done on a Hollywood set. What a compliment that is. But two other responses. So this is a joke, actually. This next one is a joke, but it's a fun joke. So NASA goes to Hollywood and they say, okay, we got to fake this moon landing. So what will it require? Yeah. And they said, well, we got to do this, and we have to actually have a launch, all right, because people see the launch, and we got to do this. Right. We got to have a set, and we have to evacuate it, and so that the dust falls quickly, and have to put them on point joists so that they look like it's not regular gravity. But we did all this research, and we concluded that what's way simpler than that is to film it on location. Okay. So they filmed it on location. They faked it on location. All right. So the third one is, there's 10,000 scientists and engineers, plus or minus a few thousand. You saw the launch. You can calculate how much fuel is in that rocket. The rocket is 36 stories tall, and the astronauts are up here. And the rest of that is fuel. Mm-hmm. It's a controlled bomb, basically. And they're right here. All right. And then they launch. And we have warehouses of engineering drawings trying to get this Saturn V off the ground. And all of the preliminary ones, you've seen the videos of rockets exploding on the launch pad. Thankfully, no one was aboard. They were test runs. So all of this is happening leading up to the Saturn V rocket. So there it is. I would submit to you that to fake all of that would require so much effort that you might as well just do it. Okay? And calculate how much fuel this is. That's enough fuel to go into orbit, go to the moon, orbit the moon, come back to Earth. That's how much fuel is actually in the rocket. And at launch, where do you think it was going? To like the Piggly Wiggly? To get groceries? Where do you think this rocket was going? I'm sorry, I'm screaming at you here. Sorry. One thing that all conspiracy theorists have in common, all of them, is they already know the answer that they want. And where they don't have data to support it, they invoke a cover-up. And that enables them to gap across places that they cannot otherwise support with data. I had a friend who, a full-grown man, otherwise rational, said to me, I've read the websites that doubt that we landed on the moon, and they're pretty convincing to me. But if you tell me that we landed on the moon, I'll believe you. And I said it has nothing to do with my authority over information about what you should believe. It was interesting because he respected me enough that my simple statement would I asked him, what evidence do you seek that would have you believe that we landed on the moon. So if we had photos of the landing sites, because you can't do that from Earth, because through the atmosphere, the resolution is not fine enough to see that. But the Japanese have sent satellites that orbited the moon, and reconnaissance satellites. I said, there's this satellite, and 4 years ago, whenever I had this conversation with him, it got images, and you can see the landing site, you can see the tracks from the rover, and you can see all right? And he said, okay, so he goes, and the next day, he said, Neil, I saw that website, but I noticed that the NASA logo was also on that website, along with the JAXA, all right? And so I don't know if I can trust it. I said, you asked me what evidence would convince you. I just presented you that evidence, and you're not convinced. There's nothing more this conversation can do. I can't. We're done here.
We're done.
We're done.
Well, around the time that you were working with the government on the commission and so forth, you were living near the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Still do, yes.
Oh, you still do?
Yes.
So you heard the planes hit the building and everything else like that?
So I did not see the first plane. Mm-hmm. There was just smoke. I went to vote that morning. It was a Tuesday. There was some primary of some lesser election. And I'm walking back and there's smoke coming out of that, and there's sirens. So that's odd. It's a bad accident, tragic accident. And everyone else is thinking the same thing. And so I was worried because I'm closer to the base of the towers than they are tall, which means if it falls, it could fall on my building. So if you want to know the math of that, it's kind of fun. To see the top of the building, if your sight line is higher than 45 degrees, that means you are closer to the base of the building than the building is tall. And so I went out with my camcorder, which is all we had at the time, camcorders, and I zoomed in. I had a 9x optical zoom just to see how bad is this? Is it going to collapse? If it does, how might it collapse? At that point, this huge explosion comes out the South Tower. And my view from the south of the South Tower was blocked by the Hilton Millennium Hotel. And so this huge, biggest explosion I've ever seen, rivaling Hollywood, rivaling the explosion in Die Hard, where the entire floor blows out from the C4. It was bigger than that, And I remember cowering from the pulse, the radiative pulse of this explosive energy. And that's when people freaked out in the road, because it goes from a sad accident to, oh my gosh, this is a terrorist attack. We're under attack. People did the probability instantly in their heads. You don't have two buildings explode in that moment, within an hour. So I remembered having not seen the plane because our view was blocked. There's this huge explosion, but there's no shockwave. And I said, how could we not have a shockwave? That's odd. So I wonder what blew up. I would later learn it's rocket fuel, basically. And there's something called a deflagration wave, where if you atomize fuel and you ignite it in one place, there's a rate at which the flame will move through the atomized particles and the vapor. And that's a deflagration wave. And that can have quite a bit of pressure built up within it, but nothing like the shock wave of an explosion from a bomb. If you study explosions like the Oklahoma City explosion, that shattered windows quarter mile away. That's the shock wave that does the damage when you have such an explosion from a bomb. If it's just fuel catching fire abruptly, it's a very different phenomenon. And so it barely made any noise. I mean, it was in the din of the background city noises that you could see it, but you definitely felt it.
Yeah, crazy. That was definitely a crazy day in America.
Right, and it was an assault on America, assault on my city, but it was also an assault on my backyard.
Yeah. My
2 kids were 9 months and 5 and a half. And I said 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 and a half. And the World Trade Center Plaza, we would push them through on strollers. And we'd look up and walk around it. And so it was was a multiple assault on my neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah. That was definitely a rough time for us.
Yeah.
Well, by 2004, that's when you started to host Origins on PBS.
Yes. Actually, just before that, I hosted a spinoff from Nova called Nova Science Now.
Okay.
Which is Nova, you may remember, it's a narrated, a disembodied voice, and it's a narrative documentary. Nova Science Now, I was host, and I would go around. I'd have correspondence and reporting on the science of the world, and it was a fun sort of exposure to the world of television. Because as a professor, I kind of require that I can see your eyes in an audience to know, are you falling asleep? Am I interesting to you? Is the subject interesting? Is it, what? And that feedback is important for me to become a better educator. But if I'm just looking at a camera lens, it took me more than a year to get comfortable with it. Now I can just stare at a camera lens and imagine there are thousands of people on the other side and then feel the same energy I would if I were in a live audience. So that was sort of a proving ground for me. And then I hosted a Nova special, a couple of them, and then Cosmos would call. Yeah.
Right. Now, was this around the same time that you started to question Pluto being a planet?
So Pluto.
Man, let me just say this. I grew up,
Don't get me started. Meet me outside.
Pluto was the 9th planet. That's what I, learned growing up as a kid. But you messed all that up.
No, I was an accessory.
You're an accessory to messing all that up. Okay.
I did not pull the trigger.
You didn't pull the trigger. Okay.
Definitely drove the getaway car. Okay, I will admit that, confess that. So Pluto had issues. From the day it was discovered, it had issues.
Okay.
Many of them were swept under the rug because it was just nice to have discovered a planet in the 20th century. All right, one had been discovered in the 19th century and in the 18th century. So that would be Uranus and Neptune. So there was strong urges to keep Pluto alive. But beginning in the 1970s, as we got better and better data on the size of Pluto, it was like smaller than people had previously hoped it would be. It had less mass. It would be less disruptive in the outer solar system with its gravity than people were projecting for it. And so you look at textbooks in the 1970s, when they have the enumeration of the planets, Pluto is lumped together with the comets and the asteroids. Pluto, comet, and other vagabonds of the solar system. That's where we started thinking about Pluto in that context as early as the 1970s. So Pluto had it coming. The writing was on the wall, and what really called the jury in, or whatever the legal term would be, was we, colleagues of mine at a telescope in Hawaii, discovered another object in a similar orbit to Pluto that had similar properties to Pluto. So maybe Pluto was not alone in this zone. And they kept looking and they found other and more and more and more. And once you map it out, it's like a belt of objects, icy objects in the outer solar system. And we named it for someone who predicted that it could be there. And his name is Gerard Kuiper. And so it's called the Kuiper Belt of Comets. So Pluto wasn't the 9th planet. Pluto was the first and one of the more significant objects in a new swath of real estate. So we didn't lose a planet, we gained the Kuiper Belt. Okay. And I think Pluto's happier that way. Okay. It's the king of the comets rather than being the puniest of the planets.
Okay. And then by 2007, you became a regular on The Universe on the History Channel.
Oh, yeah, the History Channel called me. I said, why are you doing The Universe? You're the Hitler Channel. Those who may remember the era. Anytime you put it on, there's some World War II.
Something about Hitler, right.
Something about Hitler, the Hitler Channel. So, well, we want to broaden out. And I didn't really trust them at first. I said, who else are you interviewing? And they gave me the list. And they were good people. They did their homework. Like, I know these people, and they're good. They're good on a camera. They got good expertise. I said, fine, I will participate. But you know what they did? They interviewed all of my colleagues in their expertise. And then they came back to me and asked me the same question they asked everybody. And then they just picked my answer or their answer for their final edit. And I ended up being more than half of the FaceTime out of what was at least a dozen people that they showed me that they would have. I had people coming up to me after and say, "Well, I love that new TV documentary you're hosting." And I said, "No.
I just interviewed.
No." And so from that point onward, I have a policy. If I'm interviewed for you didn't ask this, but I have a policy. If I'm interviewed for a documentary, I want to know how many other people are interviewed, and I can't be more than a fraction relative to that total. They got to get the contents from other people. I don't mind being a part of it. I don't mind being even a little bit bigger part than my fraction, but I have limits to this so that no one is going to think it's my show. So that no one will think it's my show. It's their show.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Well, I mean, you started doing a lot of television stuff. You were, by 2011, you were the host of PBS Nova Science Now.
Yes.
You know, and you started to kind of become the most prominent scientist on television.
Visible, most visible.
The most visible.
Yeah.
How did that really affect your career?
Well, beginning beginning the late 1990s, I was brought to the American Museum of Natural History to help figure out what to do with the then Hayden Planetarium, which was getting a little old. Its attendance was dropping relative to other places in the museum, and it needed to be overhauled. And so I became project scientist of that overhaul. And then we built a brand new Department of Astrophysics, where research would be conducted there. And once that happened, I separated myself from Princeton, where I was doing postdoctoral research. And I've been there ever since, which now like almost 30 years. So that, first as an advisor and then to run the planetarium. All this public stuff, normally that would count against you academically. They don't want you on TV.
Yeah.
They want you in the lab.
Right.
Writing grants, of course. In my case, I don't think it counted against me. I think it was neutral. Because my title was director of the Hayden Planetarium and also a member of the Department of Astrophysics. So if I'm doing public-y things, you can't fault me for fulfilling a job description. All right? So that's how that played out. So initially I had a stronger research fraction of my portfolio. It's much less in this moment. I want to resurrect it in the coming years. I have a few more projects, public projects I want to get done. And then I could be delusional thinking that when I'm done with that final book, I'll now go back to the lab. Maybe that's delusional, but I keep telling myself that it's going to happen. And so yeah, it's the field. My field is a little more along in embracing someone's public exposure because we know that funding for NASA and the National Science Foundation flows through Congress, and Congress is voted by the public. The public knows what we're doing. They might be more interested in learning more about what we do. The James Webb Space Telescope is fully paid by your tax dollars. It makes headlines every time, no matter what it finds. Even when it finds nothing when it should have found something, that's headlines, okay? So, yes, there's a landscape here that most of my colleagues know and understand needs to be brought to the public for the health of everything. I can't say the same for physics or some other branches of science. They're a little behind on this. And we had some very good leaders in this exercise, especially the likes of Carl Sagan, who was first out of the box, really, to do this in a big way.
Well, in 2014, you did an interview, and they asked you, what do you think about God? And you said, I remain unconvinced by any claims anyone has ever made about the existence or the power of a divine force operating in the universe. Right?
Yeah, I would have said something like that for sure.
Right. And, you know, since then...
By the way, just to be clear,
yeah,
what's probably missing from your extracted quote is the setup for that, which would be, is there a particular God you have in mind that you want me to comment on?
Huh. Okay, I missed that.
Because if you go online and in a Google search you type God's worshipped by humans, there's a tally of all the gods ever worshipped by humans in the history of civilization, and it just goes screen after screen after screen after screen. So when you say, do you believe in God? Which God? Is it Zeus? Is it Poseidon? Is it the Jewish God? Is it the Christian God? Because the Jewish God from the Old Testament is filled with wrath, okay? All right, and smoting and smiting and whatever the past tense verb is. And so, and the New Testament, God is kinder, all right?
A little nicer, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so you look at all of this and say, is that the God you want me to comment on? Or is there some other God? Typically, it's the Judeo-Christian blend there. In that context, I would say in my studies of the universe, I value evidence, and I don't see evidence for any kind of active intelligence or power over anything.
Yeah.
But if you had evidence, show it to me. I'm all in.
Well, I mean, you said you don't like to be labeled an atheist, more agnostic.
Yeah.
And the definition of agnostic is a person who believes that nothing is known or can be known of the existence or nature of God.
Yeah, I'm not
or
all,
of anything.
Agnostic comes closer to what I am than atheist does.
Yeah.
But all of that rest of that baggage that agnostic carries is off the edges for me.
Okay.
So the reason why I disavow the atheist title is very simple. The most visible atheists today say things, do things, and think things that I don't do.
Such as?
They're quick to use CE and BCE when referencing dates on the calendar.
Okay.
CE, Common Era, BCE, before
Christ.
They have eschewed the BC and AD, because that makes a religious reference. I totally celebrate AD and BC because the calendar that we currently use, the Gregorian calendar, what came out under Pope Gregory, who figured out that the leap day system of ancient Rome doesn't work. You have to adjust that. And so they adjusted it and corrected the calendar. Oh, a whole lot of astronomical analysis.
Right, because there's no zeros in the Roman calendar. In the
Roman
numeral system.
Zero was not invented yet.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's not the only reason. Yes, because Roman numerals, you cannot represent zero with Roman numerals. Exactly. Interestingly, I don't know if you've ever thought of that. Yeah. There's no zero there. So it's not just that zero got invented afterwards. It's that the relationship between the day of the year and where Earth is in its orbit was more precisely defined, or rather, where the sun is in its orbit around Earth. We were still largely, among many, we were geocentric at the time. But it doesn't matter if you're accounting for time frames. Point is, if they put in the hard work, I'm going to respect that. And I'm not going to sweep that under the rug. My favorite musical on Broadway, which I saw in real time because that's how old I am, was Jesus Christ Superstar. I love it. I listen to that every Easter and then some. Okay, I love culture as a binding force of civilization. They're atheist Jews, ardent atheist Jews who still celebrate a Passover Seder.
I'm an atheist Jew.
Atheist Jew. Right. And you still leave the empty seat for Elijah and unlock the door. By the way, if someone did walk through the door, you'd probably shoot him, okay? That seems to be what you can do these days, but you're not literally thinking that's going to happen. So there's a cultural exercise that you go through. So there's that. Also, I don't chase people down when they speak of their religious allegiances. I might ask them about it, but I'm not going to challenge them. I value the diversity of people's spiritual expression in this country where it is protected, and in the world, not every place where it continues to be protected, or where it was ever protected. So I once said in my Facebook post, I had a friend going up on the shuttle to fix the Hubble telescope, one of the servicing missions. And I said, my friend is going up, fix the Hubble, great. Godspeed, STS, I forgot the number. STS is how they numbered the shuttle missions, but I forgot the specific number. I said, Godspeed. What did someone say right after that? Godspeed, I thought you were an atheist.
Tức là nó thực hiện thêm 1/2 dao động nữa. Như vậy các bạn thấy trong một chu kỳ hay là trong một dao động thì nó đi được quãng đường là từ đây đến đây là 1A, đây đến đây là 1A nữa là 2A, đi về là 3A, đi qua đây 1A nữa là 4A. Như vậy trong một dao động thì nó thực hiện được quãng đường là 1A. Xin lỗi, 4A. Vậy 2 dao động thì quãng đường nó đi được là 2 nhân cho 4A, tức là 8A. Đúng không ạ? A của các bạn đây, A của các bạn là 10 nè. Như vậy 10 nhân 8 là 80 cm. Đúng chưa? Rồi, câu B. Đây là câu A. Tiếp tục chúng ta sẽ qua câu B. Tính ly độ của vật khi t bằng 6 giây. Thì các bạn thế vào đây, thế t bằng 6 vào. Như vậy chúng ta thế t bằng 6, x6 này sẽ bằng 10 nhân cos của pi trên 3 nhân t thế bằng 6 cộng pi trên 2. Thầy rút gọn chỗ này đi là 10 cos. Thằng này rút gọn thằng này là cos của pi trên 2 luôn. Đúng không ạ? Xin lỗi, 6 chia 3 được 2, cos 2. 2 pi đó, 2 nhân pi nhân 2 đó, cộng pi trên 2. Thì cos của 2 pi là số vòng chẵn rồi, các bạn bỏ đi. Đúng không ạ? Như vậy chỉ còn cos của pi trên 2. Cos của pi trên 2 thì nó bằng 0, 0 nhân số 10 thì nó bằng 0 luôn. Đúng chưa ạ? Các bạn lưu ý chỗ này cho thầy. Nhắc lại nha. Đúng không ạ? Thầy nhắc lại ha các bạn. Chỗ này nè, các bạn có thể nó bằng hoặc là em nào không biết thì các bạn cứ bấm bình thường. Và lưu ý khi bấm chúng ta phải đổi ra radian nha. Đúng không ạ? Điều đó rất là quan trọng nha. Tại vì góc trong vật lý chúng ta để đơn vị nó là radian. Được chưa? Rồi tiếp tục chúng ta qua bài tiếp theo.